So this next movie it's kind of funny because this next movie has
Sounds pretty
the
serious.
best reviews of what we've talked about this week, even though it has fewer reviews counted to be technical in terms of one of only Viven, I should say. And it's also the longest. This movie's 111 minutes long. And I know, listener, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute.
2
That
hours.
must mean Will Ashton didn't watch it. And you're right. Will did not watch this movie. I watched Words on Bathroom Walls.
To be fair, I reached out to you and was like, hey, is there a chance I could see this film? Because I was interested.
Yeah. The screener expired. I would have sent it to you.
Yeah, you were like, the time had passed, and it's like, okay. So it wasn't like I had the chance to see it.
Yeah.
And it went away. I was willing to check it out, and it just didn't work out. So you saw and I didn't.
That's right. So I was going to say that, Will. I wasn't going to fully throw you under the bus. I was just going to have a little fun. But yes, this movie is currently only playing in drive-in theaters and limited release. It's not available on VOD last I checked. So it's a little tougher to get to. But I did see a screener. So I mentioned it on the show before already. But yeah, I did watch Words on Bathroom Walls a while back. And the reason was because they moved the embargo. It was actually supposed to release a bit sooner, and so I'd already seen it and done the review and everything, but then we found out no, the embargo got pushed, and so now we're talking about it. And yeah, I did a written review for this on cinemaholics.com, but just to sort of like recap, this new movie is directed by Thor Freudenthal, who you would probably remember from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Percy Jackson 2, The Sea of Monsters. Probably butchering the name of that movie, but you kind of get the idea. And so this movie is kind of like taking the teenage coming of age drama and, you know, the kind of thing that's like based on a book, in this case, Words on Bathroom Walls by Julia Walton, where you have like the sort of Fault in Our Stars, 5 feet apart kind of dynamic where people fall in love, but the problem is the teenager has a condition that prevents him from being quote unquote normal. And that teenager is named Adam, who is played by Charlie Plummer, we remember from Lean on Pete, All the Money in the World. And he sort of has an issue where he gets kicked out of school because he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he has an episode where he accidentally hurts another student. So he has to start going to a Catholic school. And he kind of sparks like a potential relationship with one of the girls at school, played by Taylor Russell. Now, there's this whole romance thing with them. And the first thing I'm going to say is like, no, this is not as good as the romance in Waves that we get with Taylor Russell, but it is very similar. But it's similar to A Fault because if you watched Waves, you might have a hard time believing this relationship because it's just weird because there are so many red flags that Taylor Russell's character gets without knowing that he has schizophrenia. So he's hiding it, but then he does terrible things to her, but then we don't know, she doesn't know why. And yet she still loves him. And there's certain things that happen that I think are probably more elegantly handled in the book. But that is like the big criticism of this movie. Basically everything else is pretty decent. I actually think this movie is a positive thing for the mental health community, for people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia and who are probably sick and tired of movies and TV shows always portraying them as like dangerous criminals. And it does that. It does tell a new kind of story of a person who has this condition without sort of like skirting around the limitations and the difficulties of it, and how you watch Charlie Plummer's character Adam struggle with how, you know, if I take my medication, like there are actual trade-offs. Like it doesn't solve all my problems. Love doesn't solve all my problems. Like I still have to figure out how to deal with this thing. And then you also have some drama where his mom, played by Molly Parker, starts, you know, dating this guy played by Walton Goggins, and he feels like she's trying to start like a new family without him. And all the while, his schizophrenia manifests in a very cinematic way, in a sense where the voices he hears show up as real people. And the movie sort of addresses that this is a very unique thing. So you'll probably remember, you know, speaking of Russell Crowe, like A Beautiful Mind, that kind of thing. And these characters, one of them is played by Anna Sophia Robb, for example. There's a few others that you might recognize from movies here and there. I didn't remember off the top of my head, but I think one of them was Devin Bostick, who some people might remember from The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I think the first, second, and he plays Roderick. I don't know which ones he was in, but yeah, he's in this. But anyway, we also have Andy Garcia, who plays a priest who sort of like tries to help Adam, but he's kind of like, he's also in the dark. And he sort of gives out platitudes. So this movie is also kind of about like how religion can kind of like be a factor in the difficulties that like teenagers have when they sort of reach this like existential part of their lives where they have to reckon with, how complicated and messy life is and how adults are always going to let them down, with sort of the black and white teaching of religion. I think that's where this movie is probably at its strongest, is the cinematography and the storytelling, just through like the way it portrays the Catholic Church in a way to tell a story about how there are no easy answers, even though religion is sort of something that at first glance is like, well, there's easy answers. You just have to, be a Christian and then everything's going to work out. But then it's sort of being like, no, that's not, really what the gist of life is. There's a lot more to it than that. I'm not saying that that's like what Christians profess, but it can sort of be how it's perceived by some people. And so that's something I really appreciate about this movie, is it gets that point across in a way that's not super in your face. And if the romance was just a little bit stronger, if we hadn't seen a much stronger, more believable and natural romance grow out of like teenagers dealing with like really deep-seated traumas in a movie like Waves, then I would probably be way more into this. But as it stands, I think that's it is pretty decent. And I was a fan of a lot of it. I was actually impressed too by the music. Chainsmokers and Andrew Hollander did the music. And when they were bragging about that in the trailer, that was a huge red flag. So I was like, if your movie is bragging about music being composed by the Chainsmokers, who by the way, have never composed a film score before, this is their first one. That kind of was like, they're bragging about that. That could be a bad sign. But my skepticism was misplaced. It's actually a pretty decent soundtrack, and I think the Chainsmokers actually do pretty well here. I think it was a good fit for them to sort of like infuse music that I shouldn't say that like I know what the kids are listening to. So maybe to like actual teenagers, they'd be like, this is pretty dumb. This is like, boomer music or something. I don't know. Maybe they'll hate it. But I know for me, it came off to me as, if not authentic, fitting, based on my read of how high school is these days, which is probably very limited. But anyway, words on bathroom walls. I think it's a decent watch. If it was on VOD, I would readily recommend it, but I definitely do not recommend risking your life or the life of other people to go see this in a theater. That is certainly not what you should do. Wait until it's either at a drive-in, or you can check it out on demand if you're interested. And unless you're one of our international friends where your theaters are open, and I'm mainly talking to Americans here, and if you're in a country where it's unsafe to be in like indoor spaces, I know there's a few around the world, but not many. And other than that, I think you should be good to check this out. But again, it is pretty long, 111 minutes. Probably didn't need to be that long. Probably could have been a little bit leaner, but it's not too bad. I wasn't. There was no point in this movie where I was really taken out of it and like, can they just finish this already? I was pretty much with it the whole time. So that's Words on Bathroom Walls. I'm actually like a really low B on it. I'm probably going to go actually with like a high B minus. I think that it's almost in the B territory, but I do have to knock it a bit for the romance, just not really being up to par. And I think that will get in the way of some people who might enjoy this. And I should say, there could be some people who watch this and they don't appreciate the way that it tackles mental illness. I really can only speak from my pretty limited perspective. I don't know if it's really portraying this in a way that will actually resonate with people. So my grade is kind of tentative right now. I do want to read up on what other critics are saying about it. I haven't seen any yet from people who might be able to watch this with like that in mind, to be like, hey, maybe it does a good job of this, maybe it doesn't. I'm not aware as of right now. But right now on Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 82%. So pretty high average among people who watched it. Only 44 reviews though, from what I'm seeing right now. So not a bad movie to check out during quarantine. And Will, I won't say that it's like a must watch for you, but if you do check it out, I would be curious to see what you think.
I mean, I do think Charlie Plummer is a pretty talented young actor, and I haven't seen everything he's done, but the things I have seen him in, he does seem to be a pretty genuine and natural actor in a way that I really appreciate. So, I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, if I had access to a screener, I probably would have checked it out.
Okay.
But alas, that
if
wasn't
only
in the
you
cards for me.
There was somebody who looked out for you. And
yeah. I don't think it's like something it would have been like for me to begin with, but I am glad that it exists. It seems like it'll hopefully do some good. So I'm glad to hear that.